I can still hear their laughter echoing around the dinner table. It was Thanksgiving 2018, and I had just announced my plans to leave my stable job at Microsoft to start my own tech company, a virtual assistant for small businesses. My brother Michael snorted, nearly choking on his wine. That's been done 1,000 times. What makes you think you can compete with the big players? I tried to explain my vision for Nova AI, an artificial intelligence platform that would revolutionize how small businesses handle customer service and operations. But Michael, fresh from his MBA and working at Goldman Sachs, just smirked and shook his head. "David, be realistic," he said, using the condescending tone he perfected since childhood. "You're a decent programmer, but you don't know the first thing about running a business. You'll burn through your savings in 6 months." My parents exchanged worried glances. They'd always treated Michael as the smart one, the one who followed the traditional path to success. Meanwhile, I was the dreamer, the one who spent nights coding instead of networking at fancy bars. "Honey," my mother started gently, "maybe you should listen to your brother. He does have an MBA. From Harvard," Michael added helpfully, as if anyone at the table had forgotten. "And I'm telling you, this idea is dead on arrival. The market's saturated, the technology's too complex, and you don't have the connections to raise serious capital." I looked down at my barely touched turkey, my appetite gone. "I've been developing the core AI engine for 2 years," I said quietly. "It's different from anything else out there. If you just let me show you." "David," my father interrupted, his voice heavy with disappointment, "you have a good job at Microsoft. Benefits, stock options, stability. Why throw that away on some pipe dream?" The way he said pipe dream made my chest tighten. It was the same tone he used when I wanted to study computer science instead of finance like Michael. When I chose to work as a programmer instead of going to business school. When I bought my modest apartment instead of stretching myself thin for a luxury condo like my brothers. Michael leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine with an air of expertise. "Look, if you're bored at Microsoft, I can make some calls. Goldman's tech division is always looking for competent programmers. The pay's better, and you'll learn how real business works." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "Thanks for dinner, Mom. I need to get back to work. On your little startup." Michael laughed. "It's Thanksgiving. Take a break from your hobby." That word, hobby, was the final straw. I walked out without another word, ignoring my mother's calls to come back. They didn't understand. They couldn't see what I saw. The next morning, I submitted my resignation to Microsoft. My team leader, an older programmer who'd been in the industry for decades, tried to talk me out of it. "David, you're one of our best developers," she said. "Whatever they're offering you, we can match it." "It's not about money," I replied, thinking of Michael's smug face. "I need to do this." I had $175,000 in savings, enough runway for 18 months if I was careful. My apartment wasn't much, but the mortgage payments were manageable. I could survive on ramen and coffee if I had to. The first 6 months were brutal. I worked 20-hour days, sleeping on a camping mattress in my makeshift home office. My dating life disappeared. My friends stopped calling, but slowly, line by line, function by function, Nova AI took shape. My core innovation wasn't just in the AI's natural language processing, though that was revolutionary enough. The real breakthrough was how the system learned and adapted. Most AI assistants were one-size-fits-all solutions. Nova AI evolved with each business it served, developing industry-specific knowledge and customized responses. A small coffee shop in Seattle became my first beta tester. Within weeks, their customer satisfaction scores jumped 40%. Their staff could focus on making coffee instead of answering the same questions about hours and menu items over and over. Word spread. More small businesses signed up for the beta program. The data poured in, and Nova AI grew smarter with each interaction. By month 8, I had a waiting list of eager customers. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. I was debugging a new feature when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Is this David Chen?" a woman's voice asked. "I'm Sarah Marshall from Vertex Ventures. We've been hearing interesting things about Nova AI." My heart stopped. Vertex Ventures was one of the top tech investors in Silicon Valley. "Yes, this is David," I managed to say, trying to sound professional while sitting in my apartment wearing 3-day-old sweatpants. We'd like to schedule a meeting. Our partners are very interested in what you're building. The meeting was set for the following week. I spent 3 days preparing my pitch deck, refining the demo, practicing my presentation until I could recite it in my sleep. When I walked into Vertex's sleek offices, I felt like an imposter in my only suit. Sarah Marshall sat at the head of the conference table, surrounded by partners in expensive clothes. They looked bored. They'd probably saw dozens of pitches every week. Then I started my demo. I showed them how Nova I handled complex customer interactions, learning and improving with each conversation. How it integrated with existing business systems, automating everything from inventory management to employee scheduling. How it could scale from a single coffee shop to a nationwide chain without losing its personalized touch. The partners stopped looking bored. They started asking questions, intelligent, probing questions that showed they understood the potential. When I finished, Sarah leaned forward. "Mr. Chen, what's your current valuation?" I quoted a number that felt ambitious, $10 million. The partners exchanged glances. "We'd like to offer you $5 million in series of funding at a $20 million valuation," Sarah said calmly, as if she wasn't just doubling my highest hopes. "We believe Nova I could be a game changer in the small business market." I somehow kept my composure through the rest of the meeting, through the initial paperwork, through the handshakes and congratulations. It wasn't until I was alone in my car that I allowed myself to cry. The investment changed everything. I moved Nova I into real offices, hired a team of brilliant developers, brought on experienced sales staff. The waiting list for our beta program grew into the thousands. TechCrunch wrote an article calling Nova I the future of small business automation. Forbes included me in their 30 under 30 list. Our valuation climbed to $50 million, then $100 million. I bought a new apartment, a nice one in a boutique building downtown. I could afford better clothes, better food, better everything. But I kept my old camping mattress in my office as a reminder of where I started. My parents called when the Forbes article came out. They were suddenly very interested in my hobby. I let their calls go to voicemail. Then, exactly 2 years after that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, my assistant walked into my office with a familiar resume in her hand. "David, you might want to look at this application for the senior business development position," she said, trying to hide a smile. "The candidate has an MBA from Harvard." I stared at Michael's resume, laid out perfectly on my mahogany desk. Harvard MBA, Goldman Sachs, impressive networking connections, all the things he bragged about at that Thanksgiving dinner. But there, buried in a fine print, was what he didn't want anyone to notice. He'd been between positions for the past 6 months. "Should I schedule an interview?" my assistant asked, keeping her face professionally neutral, though I could see the glint of amusement in her eyes. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about all those family dinners where Michael had dominated the conversation with stories about his latest deals, his rising position at Goldman, his connections with the financial elite. Now here he was, applying for a mid-level position at the company he'd once called a pipe dream. "Schedule it for tomorrow at 9 a.m., I said finally, "but don't tell him who he's meeting with. Let's see if he recognizes his little brother in the CEO's chair." That night, I could barely sleep. I kept thinking about the years of condescension, the dismissive comments, the way he convinced our parents that my dreams were worthless. Now Nova I was valued at over $500 million, with offices in 3 countries and a client list that included some of the biggest names in retail and hospitality. The next morning, I arrived early, watching through the security cameras as Michael entered the building. He looked different, his designer suit slightly less crisp, his confident stride a bit less certain. 6 months of unemployment had taken their toll on his famous ego. I waited until he'd been sitting in the reception area for exactly 20 minutes, just long enough to make him sweat, before asking my assistant to bring him in. Michael walked into my office with his practiced Goldman Sachs swagger, and stopped dead in his tracks. I watched the color drain from his face as recognition hit him. "David." "Hello, Michael," I said calmly, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "Please have a seat. We have a lot to discuss." He sank into the chair, his carefully prepared interview expressions crumbling into confusion. This is your company, Nova I." The same hobby you laughed at 2 years ago. I confirmed, picking up his resume. I see you're looking for a career change. Goldman Sachs didn't work out. His face flushed. There were structural changes in the department. It was a mutual decision to part ways. Mutual? I raised an eyebrow. According to my sources, you were let go after losing several major accounts. Something about refusing to adapt to new market conditions. Michael's jaw tightened. You've been checking up on me. I make it a point to thoroughly vet all potential employees, I replied, enjoying his discomfort, especially ones who claim to be experts in business development. Look, David, he leaned forward, switching to the persuasive tone he'd always used to get his way. I know we've had our differences, but I can be a real asset to your company. My connections, my experience. Your connections to the financial world that called Nova I a guaranteed failure. I interrupted. Your experience in traditional business models that are becoming more obsolete every day. He flinched. I was wrong about Nova I. Okay. Is that what you want to hear? I didn't see its potential. But I'm seeing it now, and I know I can help take it to the next level. I stood up, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Last month, Nova I processed over 10 million customer interactions for businesses across the globe. We're expanding into Asia next quarter. Our latest AI engine is handling complex operations that most experts said were impossible to automate. Turning back to him, I continued, and we did all of this without your Harvard MBA. Without your Goldman Sachs connections, without your real business expertise. Michael's face hardened. So this is revenge? Making me come here just to reject me? No, I said quietly. This is a lesson in humility, something you've never been very good at learning. I picked up his resume again, making a show of reviewing it. The position you're applying for requires innovation, adaptability, and most importantly, the ability to admit when you're wrong. Are you capable of any of those things, Michael? He started to respond with what I assumed would be another practice pitch, then stopped. For the first time, I saw something crack in his perfect facade. I don't know, he admitted finally. I thought I knew everything about business. Harvard, Goldman, they teach you to be so certain, so confident. But the market changed. Technology changed. And I didn't. I sat back down, studying my brother's face. The arrogance was still there. But it was tempered now by something new, fear perhaps, or recognition of his own limitations. Let me tell you what I learned building this company, I said. Success isn't about having the right degrees or connections. It's about being willing to learn, to adapt, to admit when you're wrong, and change course accordingly. Can you do that, Michael? He looked around my office, at the awards on the walls, the views of the city, the subtle signs of success he'd always chased. I want to learn, he said finally. I want to understand how my little brother built something I was too blind to see. I pulled out a different contract from my desk drawer. We have an opening in our client success team, entry-level position, working directly with small business owners to implement Nova I solutions. The pay is about a quarter of what you made at Goldman. The hours are long. You'll need to learn our technology from the ground up. His eyes widened. Entry-level? But my experience. Your experience is part of the problem, I cut in. You need to unlearn as much as you need to learn. This position is about understanding our customers, our technology, and most importantly, humility. Take it or leave it. Michael stared at the contract for a long moment. I could see him wrestling with his pride, his ego, his entire worldview about success and status. When do I start? He asked finally. Monday, 8 a.m. sharp. And Michael. I waited until he met my eyes. Don't be late. Your direct supervisor doesn't tolerate the kind of attitude you showed at that Thanksgiving dinner. He nodded slowly, understanding the new dynamic between us. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. David, I'm sorry. About everything. I was wrong. I know, I replied simply. Now prove you can do better. Over the next 6 months, I watched Michael transform. The designer suits disappeared, replaced by the casual tech company attire. The condescending tone vanished, forced out by hours of patient explanation to small business owners learning our system. He struggled at first, his Harvard-trained mind resistant to our more fluid, adaptive approach to business. But gradually, he began to understand what made Nova I special. He started contributing valuable insights from his interactions with clients. His quarterly reviews showed steady improvement. One evening, I found him still at his desk long after most employees had left, poring over customer feedback reports. Working late? I asked, leaning against his cubicle wall. He looked up, exhaustion and excitement competing in his expression. I think I found a pattern in how retail clients are using the inventory management features. If we adjusted the algorithm to account for seasonal variations. I listened as he outlined his idea, a genuine innovation born from real understanding of our clients' needs. This wasn't the Michael who'd laughed at my dreams. This was someone new. Good work, I said when he finished. Write it up and we'll discuss it in the next development meeting. He beamed like I just offered him a partnership at Goldman Sachs. A year after Michael started at Nova I, our parents finally visited the office. They walked through the open workspace, past the ping-pong tables and collaboration areas, trying to reconcile their image of their dreamer son with a successful CEO before them. They found Michael at his cubicle, enthusiastically explaining Nova I's features to a potential client over video chat. No expensive suit, no pretentious office, just honest work and genuine passion. We don't understand, my mother said later over dinner. Michael had such a prestigious career. Why is he working entry-level at your company? Because he's learning what real success looks like, I replied. And for the first time in his life, he's earning his position instead of expecting it. My father nodded slowly, looking between his two sons. The one who followed the traditional path to success and failed, and the one who blazed his own trail and succeeded. We were wrong, he said finally, about both of you. Today, Nova I continues to grow. We're valued at over $1 billion, with offices worldwide and a client list that reads like a who's who of global business. Michael has worked his way up to team leader in our client success department, earning every promotion through genuine merit. Sometimes, late at night when I'm working in my office, I think about that Thanksgiving dinner and all the doubts they cast on my dreams. The laughter doesn't echo anymore. Instead, I hear the daily buzz of innovation, the excitement of building something meaningful, the satisfaction of proving that success doesn't always follow the expected path. Michael still works longer hours than anyone else in his department. The Harvard MBA on his wall has been replaced by customer satisfaction awards. His Goldman Sachs connections gather dust while he builds real relationships with small business owners who trust and respect him. Last week, he popped into my office with another innovative idea for improving our system. As I listened to him enthusiastically explain the technical details, concepts he would have dismissed as beneath him 2 years ago, I realized something profound. Success isn't just about proving others wrong. Sometimes it's about giving them the chance to prove themselves right in a completely different way. Michael needed to fail in his version of success to find genuine fulfillment in mine. The brothers who sat at that Thanksgiving table no longer exist. In their place are two men who have learned the true meaning of success. Not in degrees or titles, but in the genuine impact we can have when we dare to challenge the established path. And that camping mattress, it's still in my office, a reminder that every great company starts with someone willing to sleep on the floor for their dreams. Even Michael has stopped rolling his eyes at it. After all, he keeps a similar one in his cubicle for the late nights when he's too engrossed in his work to go home. Like brother, just not in the way anyone expected.